Hi, welcome back to the video novel Follet. Today's video snippet is the third part of chapter 17. And it's just a little bit of a bit, but it is not safe for work or children. No, it is not. So just keep that in mind. Share it with people that you want to share it with, but there's some people you shouldn't share it with, so you know who they are. I will post a link to the Amazon.com webpage so you can purchase a copy of this lovely novel in paperback, or if you prefer ebook, Kindle. Or you can just stop back from time to time and enjoy video snippet after video snippet. When I finish the book, which is, we're probably 85% finished with it now, I will post it again on the Facebook page as individual paragraphs and stuff. Do a few pages at a time that way. It's kind of fun. So, with no further ado, except it's adult. This is for adults. Big adults. Yeah. Okay. Mature adults. So, keeping that in mind, if you're ready, here we go. Follet sat next to Laurie on the big rocking chair. He wore a light blue work shirt and jeans, and he was barefoot. Laurie wore a white cotton button-down shirt over a flowing patchwork skirt. She was barefoot too. Laurie turned her head to Follet, and they kissed, lips softly touching. As the kiss deepened, their mouths opened, their hungry tongues touching and then darting away. Follet touched her cheek and then moved his hand down to her chest, his fingers finding her nipple as it hardened through the soft cotton. He pinched it gently between his thumb and middle finger. Laurie moaned softly and moved her left hand down to Follet's crotch, rubbing his hardening cock through his jeans as he rubbed her breast. Their kiss ended. Follet looked deeply into Laurie's eyes and then down at her chest as she unbuttoned her shirt and then unbuttoned his. He cupped her left breast in his hand and put his mouth over her hard pink nipple, sucking it softly and then harder into his mouth, teasing its fleshy firmness with his tongue. Follet then moved away from Laurie and stood before her. She loosened his belt and unbuttoned and unzipped his jeans. She slid his jeans down over his hips. He wore no underwear, and his cock sprang out warm and slightly throbbing. As he stepped out of his jeans, she held his cock in her hand, squeezing and then releasing it, rubbing slowly up and down the shaft, while she moved her head toward his stomach and kissed his navel, sticking her tongue in that little dimple, before leaving a wet trail moving down his belly into his cock. She opened her eager mouth and took him inside, using her tongue and sucking softly, and then looked up into his face. Follet reached down to take her face in his hands and lift her to his feet, to kiss her again and again. While Follet was naked, Laurie was still wearing a skirt. As they kissed, Laurie slipped her hands inside the elastic waistband of her skirt and slid it over her hips to fall to the floor of the little porch. She was naked now, too. Laurie ended their kiss, grinned, and turned away from Follet, walking toward the little steps of the porch. She turned back to him and held out her hand, inviting him to come along. Follet took her hand, and she led him off the porch, across the little dirt yard, and down to the dock. A small canoe sat in the water, tied to the dock. "This is Papere's plank pirogue," Laurie told Follet. "He made it himself from cypress that he cut and milled. The planks had to dry for a year. He used it for trapping, mostly nutria. Mama cooked up a fine gumbo with the nutria, andouille, oysters and crabs, okra, onions, tomatoes and peppers, and a little filet." The little boat was about 14 feet long, slightly wider near the bow. The gunwales slightly flared and curved toward front and rear. The bottom was flat, and two thwarts acted as seats, one forward and one in the stern. Come see, babe," Laurie said as she climbed into the pirogue. "I want to make you an official Louisiana man." She laughed as she sat on the forward thwart. Follet heard another laugh. It was either merry or a loon. Follet walked out on the little dock and carefully climbed into the boat. Laurie leaned back into the bow, supporting her upper body with her arms, spreading her legs, kneeled down on the burden boards chair. It seemed like a good idea to Follet, who was worried about the rocking of the boat and tipping over into the swampy water. As Follet knelt, Laurie moved her right hand to her vulva, running her long pale fingers through the fine thin straw of hair that welcomed Follet to her delights. She lightly traced the contours of the flesh that hid her clit, rubbing gently and slowly, beckoning Follet to join her. He moved his head forward to kiss her fingertips, and she slipped her middle finger into herself and then pulled it out for him to lick. Follet cleaned her fingers, savoring the taste of her, and then moved his lips to kiss her there. Laurie moved her hand to the back of Follet's head and with a touch let Follet know where and how she wanted to be kissed. Follet moved his mouth as if he could lick her wet pussy. He wanted nothing more right then than to stick his tongue into her as far as he could, pushing and pressing and twirling and flicking at her cunt. Follet luxuriated in the sweet musky bouquet with just the faintest metallic note, which told him that she had just finished menstruating. Her fingers told him that he had other work to do. He straightened up and walked on his knees closer to her. He placed his hands on her thighs and pulled her toward him an inch or so. He took his cock in his left hand and guided his hardness into her wet pussy. Laurie pushed herself against him and then pulled shyly away. Follet let himself slide out of her until just the tip of his cock was barely inside her, and then once again pushed into her as far as he could. Laurie reached down to their gyrating crotches. With one hand wiped some of the wetness from herself and Follet, and then put her fingers into his mouth so that he could taste her as they moved apart and together again. Follet leaned forward to reach for her mouth with his lips, and as Laurie leaned to him, he squeezed her breast with his right hand. They began to move faster and harder now, and Laurie held Follet tightly, squeezing him just as tightly with her arms as with her legs that now wrapped around his hips. When Follet came, Laurie hesitated for just a second and then returned to kissing Follet with a passion and frenzy that galvanized Follet into a new flurry of kisses. Even after he came and began to lose his erection, Laurie kept her arms and legs tightly enfolding him, reluctant to release him. But Follet was released as the dream began to fade. And as reality returned to the little cottage by the bayou, Mary said almost to herself, "Jolie blonde, regardez donc quoi elle fait." Laurie slept, and as Mary walked to Follet and took his hand, they walked back to the caddy and left the peaceful cypress trees to watch over Laurie. When they had gotten back on the road again, Mary turned to Follet, eyes wide, and said in a hushed, awed voice, "That was amazing, Follet." Follet stole a glance at Mary out of the corner of his eye and said, "Thanks, Mary." Mary laughed out loud and said between guffaws, "I thought that you and Laurie were going to capsize that little canoe. And the boat is a rockin', don't bother knockin'," and collapsed into another fit of chortling. Follet drove on in silence, and Mary erupting only occasionally over the next few miles in sporadic convulsions of giggles.